fascinating bunch of stories that we keep telling ourselves, and we keep allowing others to tell us about our own selves. We have been allowing our parents to tell stories about us. We have been allowing our friends to tell us stories about ourselves. We have been allowing our schools and our report cards and our workplaces, our feedbacks to tell stories about our own selves. We have been allowing our families. We have been allowing our organizations to tell a lot of stories. We then keep ourselves invested in. We start believing in them, and we start manufacturing our results, which are directly related to the kind of stories that we have accepted and allowed to manifest through our own lives. Hello, I'm Ranjan Kumar, founder Mystic Fusion International and authentic influence coach. Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about two versions of our stories that we keep repeatedly living and manifesting our work through on an average every single day. The two stories that we live on an average every day are a static story. The first one is a static story, and the second one is a dynamic story. Now, if I look back into my on an average every day, probably I look two kinds of stories that I tell myself, and when I look into the stories of my clients and my audiences and my participants, I listen to them. I find that there are two stories. These are the same two stories that almost all of us tell ourselves every day. One is a static version of our story, the other is a dynamic version of our story. Listen to the stories that you have been telling about your own work, your own education, your studies, your development, your relationships, your money. Everything is directly related to the kind of stories that you have accepted into your subconscious, the kind of stories that you have been invested in, the kind of stories that you have really believed in, and the kind of stories that you have been working to manifest, to create results for. Now, all your hard work, all your effort, all your action steps are directly aligned with the kind of stories that you keep telling yourselves and believe in. Now, on an average, when I found that most of the results that I've created are directly related either to the static version of the story or to the dynamic version of the story. Now, when I say static version of the story, it goes something like this. The protagonist, the hero of the story, is not going anywhere, not doing anything, not taking any action towards the transformation of the story. Whereas in the dynamic version of the story, the protagonist is you, the hero of the story is doing something, is taking action, is really invested in the story, and he has planted himself as an action taker in the story. Whereas in the static version of the same story, it's like the story has come to a standstill and has only become a witness of what's happening in life, rather than what the story, where the story is headed towards, and what the hero of the story is actually doing. When you look at your stories from a third person perspective, probably you will have a better picture, you will have a better view of where you are and what is the story that you have been telling yourselves. Look at the results that you have been creating in your life, in your work, in your relationships, in your financial terms. When I look back into the kind of results that I have manufactured, most of the poor results that I'm displeased with, I am not happy with, I'm dissatisfied with, are the result of the stories where I was a part of a static version of my story. And wherever I have invested myself in a dynamic version of my story, I have created magical results, and I'm really happy with whatever I created because of the kind of experiences that I've created, because of the dynamic version of the story that I told myself. I remember when I first created a manuscript of my book. I took charge of that responsibility, and I went to a place where all the publishers were there, and I went approaching all the publishers in the street, and I never knew anybody, I never had any recommendations, I never had any references to make, and I had nobody to speak for me. But then I directly went to the publishers, I requested them, I spoke with them, got a little feedback, and when I started doing that, all of a sudden I saw that within 1 year of my taking responsibility to take the story forward, to lead the story, made all the difference. And I had people magically coming into my life, offering me help, and within 1 year of the beginning of this journey, of this active responsibility of taking the story forward, I saw my book printed and published and people reading my book. Now this was the beginning of my understanding of what a dynamic version of a story is. And in all the areas of my life, wherever I have been very dynamic and wherever I have taken the lead, wherever I have been the protagonist of my story, I have seen amazing experiences in my life. But at the same time, on the other side of the same coin, wherever I have not been actively engaged in my stories, wherever I have been telling myself the static version of the story and been only at the receiving end of the story, probably I didn't fare well, and I have not been happy, and I'm not happy with the kind of results that I see in my life even today, when they are the result of the static version of the story. If you look back, now this is not something that I give you as a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. If you look back to your yesterday, if you look back to your today, if you look back to your whole week, probably you will have a clearer picture. What are the stories that you believe in? What are the stories that you allow your family members to tell you? What are the stories that your friends make you believe in? And what is the story that you accept as truth? Is it a static version of the story or the dynamic version of the story? Now, why do people accept the static version? What makes them invested in being stuck in their own stories, and what prevents them from investing themselves into their dynamic version of the story? Now, here's the truth. Every time I've spoken with somebody who has been investing himself or herself in the static version, I found only one reason they do so, and because I also have done that in my past and occasionally do that, and that is avoiding taking full responsibility of the story. Well, every time I wanted to escape from the story, every time I wanted to take myself and plant myself out of the story, I have become a witness, and I've never been engaged in my story, and that's where I become a part of a static version of the story, where the story is not going anywhere, and it just goes round and round and round, and I wonder, why do I create the same results for myself? The result is of the static version of the story that I have taken for the truth, as a truth. And every time I have stepped into the story, every time I've taken full responsibility of the story, I found myself doing something, and I found myself deciding to do something. I have found myself being committed to act upon the decisions that I've taken. The single element that can make all the difference from moving you to move you from the static version of the story to the dynamic version of the story is your commitment to act upon your decisions, is your commitment to take full responsibility of your story, is your commitment to be the protagonist, the hero of your own story. Look back into your day, look back into your activities, look back into your decisions, look back into your choices, look back into your relationships, look back into the kind of results that you're producing, and see which story are you invested in. Are you invested in the static version of the story, or are you invested in the dynamic version of the story? That makes the whole difference of the kind of results that you want to produce and are producing this day. I'm sure you're going to ponder on it. I'm sure you're going to love being a witness of your own stories and the kind of choices that you make. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy being the hero of your own story. Well, if you haven't subscribed to my channel on Authentic Influence, I would invite you to subscribe to my channel, like it and share it, and I would want to listen to your experiences in the comments below. I would love to interact with you and to answer your questions. Thank you so much. Love you.